Now, how about those properties? And did you like the Clarendon property? What a great spot that is. But Crossroads, we're in here watching the segment along with you guys and going, wow, that is some property. Just like a magazine, you wouldn't expect to see that in Adelaide. It's just not what you expect. Just a great property. Now, moving along, we've got, as you know, Kylie here from Female Friendly.
And I have to say, were you wearing that sticker particularly because I was here? Or does he wear that around the place all the time?
This is my badge of honour.
You wear that every day? It does look good.
I did a few and also wore my pink tie today too.
Good. I noticed these things. I noticed these things.
Now, Kylie, your chance and my chance to catch up and everyone else's chance to catch up on what's happening with the market. And joining us for all the way from Brisbane is Cameron Cusher from RP Data. Hello, Cameron.
G'day, Anthony. Hi,
Cameron. Hi.
Now, this week reported in the press in Adelaide by the Australian Bureau of Statistics, a price drop for the September quarter of 1.4% and an overall rise of prices in South Australia of 6.3% from last year. And what's your verdict on what's happening with the market?
Well, firstly, we also put out our numbers last week, and they vary a little bit from what the ABS is reporting, and there's some differences in the methodology. Basically, the ABS data only looks at houses and doesn't take into consideration units and other semi-detached products. So our numbers are showing that over the year, Adelaide property values are up 6%, and over the quarter they're down by 0.6%. So we're not as severe as the drops that the ABS is reporting, but certainly right across the country the market is slowing down, and there is a bit of softness in the market at the moment.
So just to give us a snapshot, how is South Australia comparing with the other states?
Well, as I said, over the quarter, property values were down 0.6%, and nationally values were down by 0.4%. So slightly under what we're seeing nationally. The only markets that saw strong or any growth over the quarter were Sydney, Melbourne and Canberra, and coincidentally, they're the three markets that have been the best performer over the last year. So it suggests that those markets are just taking a little bit longer to cool down. As you're probably aware, Brisbane and Perth have been the worst performers, and then to a lesser degree, Adelaide and Hobart have also underperformed the market over the last 12 months. So that's the state of affairs at the moment, I guess, when we look at what's happening with property values.
Cameron, my mail is that Sydney is in all sorts of bother at the moment. How old is the news by the time you get to it?
Well, there's a time lag associated with any sort of property data, so that's why we look at things like weekly listings and clearance rates and time on markets and vendor discounting to give us a greater insight into what's happening, because the latest data that's come out is just September data, so there is a time lag associated with getting the total number of sales transactions. So you have to look at that more timely data, such as the clearance rates and the listings, to really form a good opinion.
Right, let's run through those. Time on market, what's happening?
At the moment in Adelaide, we're finding that the time on market's starting to creep up. It's still not too bad. We're looking at an average of 46 days for houses and 38 days for units. So not too bad. When you look nationally, the average for houses is 47 days and 41 days for units. So we're still about or below average. And then if you have a look at vendor discounting, again, not too bad in Adelaide. Vendors are having to drop their initial asking price for houses by 5.8% and for units 5.3%. And they're both pretty much in line with the national average. So not faring too badly in those contexts, but there's some other interesting data that will shed some more light on what's going on.
Volumes of transactions, are there many? I mean, the market being flooded in spring, what's the go?
The market's slow, but transaction volumes are still holding reasonably well at the moment. Again, there is a time lag with that sales volume data, but there's a slight tapering in recent months, but it certainly hasn't been a marked slowdown such as that we're seeing in most other capital cities. So Adelaide volumes appear to be holding, but it'll be interesting once we start getting through that October and November data to see what's actually happening.
Cameron, our September from the market we operate in was very slow. October's been the opposite. It's been very, very busy, but extremely price sensitive. Does that resonate?
It certainly does. What we found is that there was just no build-up in activity leading into the start of the spring selling season, but now it seems to be that there is quite a bit of activity returning to the market. in terms of people bringing their properties on the market for sale. In Adelaide, listings haven't ramped up as much as they have in most other parts of the country. At the moment, they're quite a way above the 12-month average. New listings are up almost 25%, and total listings are up by about 14%. So there is a lot more stock out there on the market, but it hasn't really moved too much, since mid-September. So it shows that there are still properties transacting and they still are coming off the market, but certainly we're finding that it's the more affordable sector of the market which is performing well, and the premium market is very quiet at the moment right across the country, and Adelaide's no different.
Okay, and the rents are so tight out there now, there's hardly any vacant properties. We believe the yields will start increasing. What's your statistical take on it?
At the moment, there hasn't been a big increase in yields. Houses in Adelaide are sitting at a yield of 4%, and units are at 4.5%. They were slightly lower. They were down as low as 3.9 and 4.4, and it certainly looks like we're at that turning point where yields are going to start improving. As you said, there's tight vacancy rates. First home buyers are nowhere to be seen at the moment generally in the market, and we saw today that building approvals are continuing to fall. So we're not building anymore, and we've got all this pent-up demand, and what that's going to mean is that landlords are going to have much more scope to start lifting rental rates in the coming months.
Cameron, we're starting to see anecdotal evidence of forced sales where the banks are telling people to just get on and sell it, and that is really on the basis of this interest rate rise yesterday for Melbourne Cup Day. I think there's going to be a massive amount of angry people out there. What's your take on all of that?
Well, certainly no one really saw it coming, and it was a bit sneaky of them to try and get it through there when the Melbourne Cup was on. I think we all expected at some point the interest rates were going to be going up, but the rhetoric coming out of the RBA was probably tending to suggest that it wouldn't be happening this month. So it certainly did surprise, and it's going to make it tougher for those people with mortgages. But it really does highlight the fact that when you're going into a property, you need to account for the fact that interest rates do change if you're on a variable interest loan. And you've got to account for the fact that there'll be times when they're lower, but there'll also be times when they're probably much higher.
Okay, now, Cameron, we're out of time. I could sit here for hours talking to you about this, but just one tip for all that's happening, and assume that you're in Adelaide, South Australia. What would you do? Buy, sell, sit tight, buy up more investment properties? You're the man. Tell me what you do.
Look, it's probably not the greatest time to be selling. As I've said, there's quite a few more properties on the market, the numbers well above average. For buyers, you're starting to gain more leverage. So if you are out there buying, negotiate hard and get yourself a really good deal. And if I was an investor, start looking around again, because there's going to be scope for those rents to start increasing once more, and get yourself a good property and set yourself up for future rental growth.
Cameron, not exactly what I wanted to hear, but but hey, listen, we're real estate agents. We're just trying to carve a living out of this. But just to round off before we head off, Adelaide, would you call it stable? Is it sort of how do you describe it on a national basis?
Adelaide has always just been the steady performer. It typically doesn't outperform the national market, nor does it have periods where it significantly underperforms the market. So it's a steady performer, and our expectation is that will continue.
Thanks, Cameron. That's been awesome, and thank you, Kylie.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, now let's go and look at some hot properties.